CNN has obtained new footage of the January 6th U.S. Capitol insurrection not seen on television until today. It's from a British documentary filmmaker, and it features new images of the violent chaos that descended on the Capitol that day. Take a look.
Right now, the people in the Capitol are sheltering in place. They have gone to one of these safe rooms or whatever, and they are sheltering in place. We have the Capitol.
That angry crowd swarming onto the ground, smashing windows, fighting the officers trying to stop them, and shouting, "We have the Capitol." This disturbing footage caps a week that saw the last public hearing of the J6 committee before the midterm elections. That hearing on Thursday ended with a very dramatic flourish, a unanimous vote to subpoena former President Donald J. Trump. Now the question is, will he or won't he comply? And earlier today, committee member Congressman Adam Kinzinger offered his thoughts.
You say he's obligated by law to respond to the subpoena. Do you believe that the Justice Department, if the president refuses, should hold him in criminal contempt?
Look, that's a bridge we cross if we have to get there. Look, we well recognize the fact that because of the committee only being able to exist till the end of this congressional year, because that was the mandate, we're at a bit of a time limit here. And as we're wrapping up the investigation, we're also pursuing new leads and facts, and we want to speak to the president.
Congresswoman and J6 committee member Zoe Lofgren joins us now with more. Hi, Congresswoman. So, as we heard there, the clock is ticking loudly. Will the committee be able to wrap up its work by the end of the year?
Of course, we've always known all select committees, including this one, are created for the life of that Congress. And this Congress ends at the end of December. We've always known that, and we will complete our work by that time.
We saw new video on Thursday. There's this new video released to the public today, including one man who said lawmakers should be exterminated like cockroaches. Have we seen the worst, or is there more evidence your committee has not yet made public?
Well, we just have volumes of video of the rioters and horrible things that they were doing. In the context of about 2-hour hearing, you can't play it all. But certainly there's no doubt that this violent armed mob intended to kill people, to hang Mike Pence, to try and kill Nancy Pelosi and the rest of us, and to stop the count of the electoral count and stop the peaceful transfer of power. That's what they tried to do.
The last hearing, there was a lot of focus about the Secret Service. I know the committee has been sifting through a lot of documents handed over by the Secret Service. Excuse me. A former Secret Service member who worked in the Trump administration, Tony Ornato, his lawyer told CNN that he has not been interviewed by the committee since March. And there have been a lot of revelations that have happened since then, including from Cassidy Hutchinson. Why has he not been brought back yet to testify and testify under oath?
He will be. We had a lot of questions, but we wanted to get through all the documentary evidence that we have now been provided, over 1 million documents. So it took a lot of time to go through that. We have successfully gone through it. And now we're in a position in the very near future to call the witnesses from the Secret Service back in for a few additional questions.
Who specifically? So you said Tony Ornato. Who else?
Well, there was also Mr. Engel, and there may be a few others. I don't want to mention all their names on television, but we want to make sure that we're getting the straight story. Some of the testimony received doesn't seem to align with some of the documents, so we have a need to understand that better from them.
In what way?
Well, I'm not going to go through the interview on TV, but for example, there was a representation made publicly, as well as in the interviews, that there was no monitoring of social media. That we know now was not correct. Certainly downplaying the knowledge of violence. That was, they knew it well in advance, and certainly by the 5th of January what they were facing. Nevertheless, they sent the vice president up to the Capitol with, a fairly small group of people to protect him into what was should have obviously been foreseen as a potentially very dangerous situation.
What about the situation that Cassidy Hutchinson had testified to about Trump lunging at the Secret Service officer in the vehicle? We know that there was testimony regarding at the hearing regarding potential obstruction on that allegation, and specifically, what more can you tell us about that? Is that one of the reasons you also want to bring back these other Secret Service members? Former, I should say.
Her testimony was that Mr. Ornato told her that he had lunged at it. But I think the real point is that the president intended to go to the Capitol with the armed mob. And we have corroborating evidence on that point. Certainly the Metropolitan Police Officer.
But that wasn't, sorry, just to clarify, that might have been my bad not being clear enough in my question. It's not about that. It's about the fact that Pete Aguilar had said that there is an obstruction investigation involving that allegation in particular. Can you expand on that a little bit?
I really can't at this point. It's not just about the incident, but the testimony. And I will say we have broadly questions about the advice given to some witnesses and whether all the witnesses were completely candid with the committee. And that's something that we're interested in, and I think the Department of Justice will be very interested in.
So it sounds like what you're saying is you have evidence of witness tampering?
I can't go into it more than that.
Last question. If the former president does not respond to the subpoena, do you think the committee should send a referral for criminal contempt to DOJ?
We haven't decided that. We expect him to come in because he has a legal obligation to come in. Of course, he also had a legal obligation to see that the laws were faithfully executed, which he completely ignored on January 6th. So we'll see. We would like him to come in. Whether or not DOJ would prosecute, that's really something they need to think about. I can't make that decision for them.
All right, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, thank you for your time tonight. Thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
You bet, anytime.
Thank you.